The streets were cold that afternoon, though the September sun was still high in the sky. Dust swirled whenever a car rushed by, and the smell of roasted hot dogs drifted from the food stand on the corner. Emma Miller's stomach growled so loudly she wrapped her arms around it, as though she could muffle the sound. Beside her, her brother Ethan tried to look brave, but his pale face gave him away. Their little sister Lily rubbed her hands together, her small voice trembling. "Emma," Lily whispered, "do you think Mom's feeling better today?" Emma forced a smile. At 9 years old, she had learned to protect her siblings from the truth. Grace, their mother, hadn't been feeling better for a long time. She had been coughing more each day, sometimes so hard she couldn't catch her breath. But Emma wouldn't let her brother and sister worry. "She'll be fine," Emma said firmly, "but we've got to bring her something to eat, okay?" Ethan nodded. He looked down at the cracked sidewalk where an old guitar case lay open in front of them. The three of them had been singing together for hours, hoping that someone passing by would toss in a few coins. "Let's try again," Ethan said, trying to sound determined. His voice cracked, but he cleared his throat. "We can do this." Emma squeezed both of their hands and began to sing softly. The tune was simple, a lullaby their mother had taught them. Ethan's voice joined hers, steady and strong, and Lily's sweet, high notes floated above theirs. The melody carried into the busy street, mingling with the sound of honking cars and hurried footsteps. For a moment, Emma closed her eyes. If she imagined hard enough, she could almost forget that they were standing in ragged clothes, almost forget the hunger gnawing at her stomach. Singing was the only thing that made her feel like life could be beautiful again. A woman in a business suit stopped and dropped a dollar bill into the guitar case. Emma's heart leapt. She smiled politely and whispered, "Thank you, ma'am." But the woman had already walked away without a glance. Hours passed, and the coins in the case barely covered the bottom. The children's voices grew hoarse. Lily's eyes welled with tears as her small body trembled. "I can't do it anymore," she whispered. Emma pulled her into a hug. "Just a little longer, Lil, for Mom." Suddenly, the shopkeeper from across the street stormed out, waving his broom. "Hey, I told you brats not to hang around here. You're scaring away my customers." Ethan stepped in front of his sisters, trying to look tough, but the man towered over him. "We're not hurting anyone," Emma said, her voice shaking. "We're just singing." "Get lost," the man barked. "Go beg somewhere else." Emma's cheeks burned. She scooped up the few coins from the case, grabbed her siblings' hands, and hurried down the block. When they were far enough, she sank onto the steps of an abandoned building. Ethan looked at the pitiful handful of change. "It's not enough," he said quietly. "It'll barely buy bread." Lily sniffled and leaned against Emma's shoulder. "Why does Daddy come for us?" she whispered. "Don't we have a daddy like other kids?" Emma froze. The question stabbed at her heart. Their mother had always avoided speaking about their father, and Emma was old enough to understand that it hurt her too much. She swallowed hard and wrapped her arms around her siblings. "Maybe he will one day," she said softly. "Maybe he just doesn't know where we are." The three of them sat there, huddled together against the evening chill, unaware that their father was closer than they could ever imagine, and that the next time they sang, his world would shatter. The glass doors of the Royal Heights Hotel slid open, and Alexander Cole stepped out into the sunlight. At 41, the billionaire CEO carried himself like a man who owned the city. His tailored suit was crisp, his polished shoes gleamed, and his expression was carved from stone. Alexander didn't notice the bustle of the street or the chatter of reporters snapping photos a block away. He had trained himself not to notice. In his world, distractions were dangerous. Business was war, and he was always prepared for battle. "Your car is ready, sir," his driver said, holding open the door of the sleek black town car. Alexander nodded curtly and adjusted his cufflinks. He was about to step inside when he heard it, faint at first, like a whisper carried on the wind. A melody, children's voices. He frowned. Music didn't belong here, not in front of one of the most exclusive hotels in the city. Across the street, three children stood close together, a battered guitar case at their feet. Their clothes were torn, their shoes barely holding together. Yet their voices blended in a harmony so haunting that it pulled Alexander's attention against his will. "Street kids," his assistant muttered with disgust. "Should I call security?" Alexander waved him off. Something about the song, something about the way the tallest girl lifted her chin as she sang made his chest tighten. The trio finished the tune. For a moment, the noise of the city seemed to hush. Then a passerby dropped a coin into the guitar case and the world rushed back. The boy bent quickly to snatch up the coin, as though afraid someone might take it away. The smallest girl leaned against the older sister, her face pale with exhaustion. Alexander should have turned away. He should have stepped into his car, closed the door, and forgotten them. But he didn't. Because then the oldest girl looked up. Her eyes clear, steady, the exact shade of gray as his own, locked on him. Alexander froze. His pulse quickened, a sharp jolt beneath his ribs. He knew those eyes, impossible, yet undeniable. The girl didn't flinch under his stare. Instead, she tightened her hold on her sibling's hands, defiance flashing across her dirt-smudged face. "Sir," his assistant prompted, "shall we leave?" Alexander didn't answer. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a wad of bills. He had given to charity countless times, always from a distance, always for the tax benefit. This was different. He crossed the street, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement. The triplets stiffened. The boy stepped in front of his sisters, his chin jutting forward like a small soldier ready to defend his family. Alexander crouched and placed the bills in the guitar case. The children didn't reach for them. "Take it," he said. His voice was calm, but inside his chest, something restless stirred. The boy shook his head. "We're not beggars," he muttered, his voice trembling. The smallest girl clutched her sister's sleeve and whispered, "Emma, I'm scared." "Emma." The name hit Alexander like a blow. His late-night thoughts of another Emma, Grace Emma Miller, rushed back with brutal clarity, her laughter, her tears, the night she'd begged him not to leave. Alexander straightened abruptly, his mask of composure cracking for a second. He turned away, jaw tight, and climbed into the car. The driver pulled into traffic, but Alexander didn't hear a word his assistant said. His mind was back in the past, with the only woman he had ever loved, and the secret she might have hidden from him. He looked out the tinted window one last time. The children had resumed singing, but now their voices sounded different, almost accusing. Alexander Cole, the man who believed nothing could shake him, felt his world tilt. He had seen his own eyes staring back at him from the face of a child. The city glittered below Alexander's penthouse, a sprawl of lights stretching to the horizon. Normally, the view calmed him. Tonight, it only made the silence inside the room heavier. He poured himself a glass of whiskey and sank into the leather armchair by the window. The memory of those children clung to him like smoke he couldn't shake. Their song, their faces, and most of all, the girl's eyes. Gray, the same storm gray as his own. Alexander took a slow sip, his hand trembling ever so slightly. That hadn't happened in years. He prided himself on control over his company, his fortune, his future. But tonight, one glance had undone him. He closed his eyes, and against his will, the past flooded in. It had been 20 years ago, but he remembered every detail. The first time he met Grace Miller, she had been sitting on the campus lawn with a book in her hands, sunlight catching strands of her chestnut hair. She wasn't like the other girls. No designer clothes, no polished charm. Just a laugh so warm that it broke through the walls he'd built around himself. She saw through him in ways no one else dared. When the world called him cold, she said he was careful. When others whispered that he'd never love, she had touched his cheek and whispered, "I already see your heart, Alex." For 2 years, she had been his everything. Until the night he left her. He hadn't wanted to, but his father, the ruthless patriarch of Cole Enterprises, had demanded it. "She's beneath you," his father sneered. A poor girl with no future. Do you think love will protect you when this empire is yours? Alexander had fought back. But when his father threatened to cut him off, to destroy not just his career but Grace's future as well, he made the choice that haunted him still. He had gone to her apartment with words rehearsed, his chest burning with shame. "Grace, this won't work. I can't give you the life you deserve. You'll only suffer with me." Her eyes had filled with tears, but she had shaken her head, refusing to believe it. "You don't mean that? Alex, please, don't let them take this from us." But he had turned his back, each step like a knife twisting deeper. That night, Grace had cried his name, and Alexander had walked away. The memory seared him even now, decades later. He slammed the glass down on the table, whiskey spilling over his hand. What if she had never forgiven him? What if she had moved on? And worse, what if she had? Alexander rose abruptly and paced the length of the room. He had spent years burying Grace beneath layers of work and wealth, but tonight her ghost stood before him. Not just her, 3 children with her eyes, her stubborn chin, her courage. Could it be? Had she kept something from him? Alexander's mind raced. Grace had disappeared shortly after he ended things. Friends said she dropped out of school, left the city. He tried to forget, forcing himself to believe it was for the best. But now, he grabbed his phone, his fingers tightening around it. "Find her," he ordered his head of security when the man answered. His voice was low, hard. "Grace Miller, I don't care how long it takes or what it costs. Find her and find out if she has children." There was a pause. "Yes, sir." Alexander ended the call and stood before the window once more. The city still glittered, but it no longer looked beautiful. It looked like a battlefield. For the first time in years, Alexander Cole felt fear, not of rivals or enemies, but of the truth. Because if those children were his, then the empire he had built on power and control was about to crumble. The room smelled faintly of medicine and damp plaster. Grace Miller sat on the edge of the thin mattress, her body bent with the weight of another coughing fit. She pressed a cloth to her lips, praying her children wouldn't hear the sound from the other room. When she pulled the cloth away, a faint stain of red marked the fabric. Her chest tightened, not just from the sickness eating at her lungs, but from fear. She could not let Emma, Ethan, and Lily see her weakness. To them she had to be strong, their anchor, their shield, their mother. Grace dragged herself to the cracked mirror nailed to the wall. The woman staring back at her was a stranger, her face thinner, her skin pale, shadows under her eyes. Her once vibrant hair had dulled. Still, she straightened her shoulders. "Not now," she whispered to her reflection. "They need you." From the next room came the sound of soft voices. The triplets were singing again, their harmony shaky but beautiful. Grace closed her eyes as tears pricked at the corners. They had inherited that gift from her. Music was the one thing she had been able to give them freely. "Mom," Emma's voice called gently through the cracked door. "We brought some bread." Grace quickly dabbed at her lips with the cloth and shoved it beneath the pillow before Emma pushed the door open. Her daughter stepped inside, her braid messy, her dress too small for her growing frame. She carried a brown paper bag, her eyes glowing with pride. "Ethan and I sang for a while," Emma explained. "Someone gave us enough for food." Grace forced a smile. "That's wonderful, sweetheart." She reached for the bag with trembling hands, but Emma caught the movement, her gray eyes narrowing. "You're tired again," Emma said softly. "You don't have to hide it." Grace's throat tightened. This child, only 9 years old, was far too wise, far too protective. Grace brushed her hand over Emma's cheek. "I'm fine, just a little weak. Don't you worry about me." Ethan and Lily rushed in then, chattering about the busy streets and the coins they had earned. Grace listened, her heart swelling with love even as guilt gnawed at her. They should have been in school, not begging strangers for food. But what choice did she have? The world had not been kind to her since the day Alexander Cole walked out of her life. She had tried to be strong, to find work, to raise the children on her own. And she had done it, barely. Every day was a struggle, but she never let herself regret the decision to keep them. They were her joy, her reason to keep breathing. And yet, her gaze drifted to Emma. The girl's chin tilted upward with that familiar stubbornness, her eyes so piercingly gray. Every time Grace looked at her daughter, she saw him. Alexander. The man she had loved, the man who had left her, the man who could never, ever find out. Because if he did, Grace shivered. Alexander Cole wasn't just rich. He was powerful, ruthless, the kind of man who got what he wanted. If he discovered the truth, if he claimed the children, she would lose them. And losing them would kill her faster than any sickness. Mom, Lily tugged at her sleeve, pulling her back from the spiral of fear. Can you sing with us? Grace swallowed hard and nodded. She gathered them close, her voice rough but steady as she sang the lullaby she had once sung for Alexander in the quiet of their college dorm. Her children leaned against her, their voices mingling with hers, unaware of the shadow looming closer with every passing day. Alexander was already searching, and soon their fragile world would collide with his. The glow of the city glittered beneath Alexander Cole's penthouse windows, but he barely noticed it. He stood by the glass wall, a glass of bourbon untouched in his hand, his mind spiraling with unanswered questions. 3 children, same age, same gray eyes, the same sharp chin that stared back at him from every mirror. His triplets. It seemed impossible. It had to be impossible. And yet, when his chief investigator placed the photographs on his desk, Alexander's breath had caught in his throat. He had stared at them for nearly an hour. Emma, Ethan, Lily. The names were scribbled on a note attached to one of the photos. Ordinary names for extraordinary children. Sir, his investigator, Marcus Reed, interrupted his thoughts. We found their mother. Alexander turned slowly, his hand tightening around the glass. Who is she? Marcus hesitated, his eyes flickering with something that unsettled Alexander, pity. He laid a thin file on the polished mahogany desk. Grace Miller. The name hit him like a physical blow. Alexander sank into his chair, the world spinning for a moment. He hadn't spoken that name aloud in nearly a decade. Grace, his college sweetheart, the only woman who had ever made him laugh until his chest ached, the only one he'd allowed into his heart. And the woman who had walked away without a word. Where is she now? Alexander asked, his voice low, controlled. Marcus shifted uneasily. A rundown apartment near the old industrial district. She works odd jobs when her health allows. Neighbors say the children sing for coins outside the hospital. Alexander's jaw clenched. She's sick. Reports suggest a chronic illness, Marcus said carefully. We don't know how severe. A storm churned inside Alexander. Rage, betrayal, confusion. He slammed the glass onto the desk, bourbon spilling across the photos. She hid them from me, he growled. For 9 years, Marcus, she robbed me of my children. But beneath the anger, something raw and dangerous stirred. A memory of Grace's smile, the way she'd sung to him softly under the stars. A memory of how much he had loved her, and how much he had hated her for leaving. Marcus spoke cautiously. What do you want us to do? Should I arrange for custody proceedings? We have enough evidence to prove. No, the word was sharp, immediate. Alexander's gaze darkened. Not yet. He wasn't ready for courts and lawyers. He wasn't ready to fight in the open, not until he saw the truth with his own eyes. He wanted to see Grace. He wanted to see if she was the same girl who had once held his heart, or if time and poverty had turned her into someone he no longer recognized. Most of all, he wanted to see his children, not through photographs, not through reports, but in the flesh, to hear their voices, to know without doubt that they were his. Prepare the car, Alexander ordered, rising to his feet. His reflection in the glass wall stared back at him, a man caught between fury and longing. I'll go myself. Marcus hesitated. Sir, with respect, are you sure that's wise, if she sees you? She won't, Alexander cut him off coldly. Not yet. This wasn't a reunion. It wasn't forgiveness. It was reconnaissance. He needed answers. And if Grace Miller thought she could hide forever, she was about to learn the truth. Because Alexander Cole always got what he wanted. And this time, what he wanted was his family. The black sedan rolled to a quiet stop at the far end of a dimly lit street. Alexander Cole adjusted the collar of his tailored coat, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the crumbling apartment building ahead. This couldn't be it. The paint peeled from the walls like shedding skin, broken windows were patched with cardboard, and a flickering streetlight cast the whole block in a sickly yellow glow. His chest tightened at the thought. Grace and the children had been living here. "Stay with the car," he told Marcus, his voice clipped. "Yes, sir." Alexander stepped out into the night, his polished shoes crunching against gravel and broken glass. For the first time in years, he felt uncertain. His world had always been luxury, power, and control. This place was none of those things. He moved quietly, each step deliberate, until he reached the building. The metal door groaned as it opened. The hallway smelled of mildew and stale air. Paint flaked from the walls, and the floorboards creaked under his weight. Apartment 3C. Marcus had given him the number, but Alexander didn't need it. He knew. His heart was already hammering in his chest. He stopped just outside the door, his hand hovering inches from the knob. He wasn't ready to face her, not yet. Then he heard it. Voices, small, sweet voices, singing. His breath caught. He turned slightly, peering through the cracked frame where the wood had splintered. Inside, 3 small figures sat cross-legged on a worn carpet, their heads tilted together as they sang. The harmony was imperfect but beautiful, innocent, pure. Emma, Ethan, Lily. His children. Alexander's throat tightened as he drank in every detail. The way Emma's braids slipped over her shoulder as she conducted the others with a little wave of her hand. The way Ethan tapped his knee to keep time. The way Lily giggled mid-verse before catching up with her siblings. He pressed a hand against the doorframe, steadying himself. He had faced hostile boardrooms, ruthless competitors, even death threats, but nothing had ever undone him like this. They were real, flesh and blood, his blood. Then another sound stirred from deeper in the room. A cough, weak, ragged, and far too familiar. Grace. She appeared slowly, moving from the bedroom with one hand pressed to the doorframe for balance. Alexander's heart lurched at the sight of her. She was thinner now, her once bright skin pale, her steps unsteady. But her eyes, those warm, deep brown eyes, still held the same quiet fire he remembered. The triplets jumped up immediately. "Mom!" Ethan rushed to her side, slipping his hand into hers. Grace smiled, though the effort seemed to cost her. "I'm fine," she whispered, brushing his hair back. "Go on, keep singing, I love hearing you." Alexander's chest ached. She looked fragile, almost breakable, and yet she radiated strength. The kind of strength only a mother could summon, even when her own body betrayed her. For a moment, anger rose again. She had stolen this from him, denied him these years. But as he watched her sink slowly onto the couch, her children crowding around her with unshakable devotion, the fury dissolved into something else, something deeper. Regret. He stepped back from the door before he could betray himself with a sound. He wasn't ready to confront her, not tonight. Not when the sight of her had stripped every layer of armor from him. Alexander turned and walked back down the hall, his fists clenched at his sides. Grace Miller had hidden his children. She had built a life without him, but she was sick. The kids were struggling, and whether she liked it or not, her world was about to change. Because Alexander Cole never walked away from what was his. And now, after 9 long years, he knew exactly where to find them. Grace stirred awake in the middle of the night, her chest aching with another wave of coughs. She sat up slowly, clutching the blanket to her chest. Something felt off. The air in the apartment was heavy, too still. She slipped quietly from the bed and padded to the front window. The street outside was nearly empty, save for the shadow of a black car parked across the road. Its engine was silent, but Grace's pulse quickened. Someone was out there, watching. She pressed a hand against the window frame, telling herself it was just her imagination. But deep inside, a chill spread. She had lived too many years looking over her shoulder, terrified that one day the past would come knocking. Terrified that he would come. Shaking, she backed away and returned to her children's room. The triplets slept soundly, curled together for warmth, their breaths soft and even. Grace knelt beside them, brushing stray strands of hair from Emma's forehead. "No one will take you from me," she promised silently. The next morning, however, something strange happened. When Emma opened the apartment door to fetch water, she froze. A basket sat on the steps. Inside were groceries, fresh bread, milk, fruit, even medicine. "Mom," Emma's voice rang with wonder. "Look what someone left." Grace rushed over, her heart racing. Her trembling hands sifted through the food. This wasn't charity from a neighbor. No one in this broken-down building had enough to give like this. She lifted a small envelope tucked beneath the basket. No note, no name, just silence. Her eyes darted toward the window. The car was gone, but the unease remained. For the next week, more appeared. Groceries, medicine, even new shoes for the children. Grace should have been relieved, but the gifts only tightened the knot in her stomach. Kindness always came with a price. One evening, Emma tugged at her sleeve. "Do you think it's an angel, Mom?" Grace forced a smile. "Maybe," she whispered, though her eyes flickered toward the window again. "But angels don't drive black cars." She didn't know that across the street, hidden in the shadows, Alexander watched from behind tinted glass. He saw the way Grace hesitated before touching the food, the way she scanned the street with fear in her eyes. And it tore at him. He wanted to walk across to tell her she didn't have to be afraid anymore, but his jaw tightened. Not yet. He would help from a distance for now. Because soon, no matter how much Grace resisted, she would have to face him. And when she did, Alexander intended to claim not only his children, but her. The evening air was cool as Grace stepped outside to gather the laundry she had strung across the tiny balcony. Her chest still ached from the morning's coughs, but tonight she felt restless, uneasy. The black car had returned. It sat across the street again, silent and unmoving, its tinted windows reflecting the flicker of the street lamp. Grace's hands trembled as she pulled the last shirt from the line. Enough was enough. Whoever was watching, she had to know. She made her way down the stairs, her worn shoes barely making a sound. The closer she drew, the louder her heartbeat pounded in her ears. When she reached the curb, the driver's door clicked open. And then he stepped out. Alexander Cole. Grace froze, the air rushing from her lungs. He looked just as she remembered, and nothing like she remembered. His hair was shorter now, streaked faintly with silver at the temples. His frame broader, his suit perfectly tailored. His gray eyes, sharp as steel, locked onto hers. For a moment, time collapsed. 9 years dissolved into a single breath. She saw him as the boy who once kissed her under the stars, and as the man who had abandoned her without a word. Her body trembled, though she forced herself to stand tall. "Why are you here?" Her voice was sharp, though the quiver beneath it betrayed her. Alexander's gaze softened, then hardened again. "I think you already know." Grace's throat tightened. She shook her head, desperate to deny the truth. "Leave, you don't belong here." He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "Those children, they're mine, aren't they?" Her heart slammed against her ribs. The words hung heavy in the air, undeniable, irreversible. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. "Emma, Ethan, Lily." His voice cracked slightly on their names. "They look exactly like me, Grace. Don't insult me with lies." Tears stung her eyes. She wrapped her arms around herself, as if shielding her body from the force of his words. "You don't get to walk back into my life and demand answers. You forfeited that right when you left me." Alexander's jaw tightened. "I didn't leave you." Grace let out a bitter laugh. Then what do you call disappearing without a word, leaving me to raise 3 children alone while you lived in penthouses and boardrooms? His expression faltered, pain flashing across his features. I never knew, Grace. I swear to you, I never knew. Silence stretched between them, charged with years of hurt, betrayal, and longing. Grace shook her head, tears sliding down her cheeks. It doesn't matter. You can't take them from me. They're all I have. Alexander's eyes burned with something fierce, something unyielding. You're wrong, he said quietly. They're not all you have. And with that, he stepped closer, his shadow spilling over hers. For the first time in 9 years, Grace realized the truth. Alexander wasn't here to leave again. He was here to stay. Emma balanced the worn basket on her hip as she walked down the narrow stairwell, Ethan and Lily close behind her. Their mom had asked them to fetch water from the corner pump, but Emma couldn't shake the tension in her chest. Her mom's voice had been strange earlier, shaken, almost scared. When they stepped into the street, Ethan stopped abruptly. Hey, who's that? A tall man stood by a sleek black car at the curb. His presence didn't match the neighborhood at all. His suit was expensive, his shoes polished, and when he turned toward them, the faint glow from the street lamp caught his gray eyes. Emma frowned. Something about those eyes made her stomach twist. They felt familiar. The man stepped forward, his voice low but warm. Evening. Lily tilted her head, her braids swinging. You don't belong here. Ethan shot her a warning look, but the man chuckled softly. You're right, I don't, but maybe I was meant to be here tonight. Emma hugged the basket closer, studying him. His gaze wasn't cold like most strangers. It lingered on them with something softer, something almost painful. You 3 were singing outside the hospital a few days ago, weren't you? He asked. Ethan's eyes widened. You heard us. I did, the man said quietly. You have remarkable voices. Lily brightened instantly. Do you think so? Mom says we sound like little birds when we sing together. At the mention of their mother, the man's jaw tightened briefly, but he quickly masked it with a smile. Your mom must be very proud. Emma noticed the way his eyes softened when he said the word mom. It made her chest ache in a way she couldn't explain. Do you live around here? Ethan asked cautiously. The man hesitated. Not exactly, I was passing through. Something in his tone sounded like a half-truth, but before Emma could question him, Lily piped up. You look like Emma. Emma gasped, her cheeks flushing. Lily. But Lily only grinned, pointing between them. The eyes, see, they're the same color. The man's expression faltered for the briefest second, his gaze locking with Emma's. Her heart gave a strange little lurch. Ethan stepped in quickly, protective. We should go, come on, Emma. They began to move past him, but the man spoke again, his voice softer now, almost pleading. Take care of your mother. Emma froze mid-step, turning back. How do you know about her? The man's lips pressed into a thin line. For a long moment he said nothing, only watched them as though memorizing every detail. Then he forced a faint smile. Because good mothers are rare, he said finally, and yours is extraordinary. Emma's heart pounded as they hurried away. She couldn't shake the feeling that the stranger's eyes had followed them long after they disappeared into the stairwell. And deep inside, she couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't a stranger at all. Grace stirred the soup absent-mindedly, her hands trembling as the wooden spoon scraped the pot. The triplets, laughter echoed faintly from the other room, but something in it sounded different tonight, hesitant, guarded. When Emma, Ethan, and Lily filed into the kitchen, their faces were unusually serious. Emma set the basket down, her gray eyes, so much like his, watching Grace closely. Mom, Emma began softly, we met someone tonight. Grace's heart stopped. She clutched the edge of the counter. Who? A man, Ethan said. His tone was sharp, protective. He drove a black car. He asked about us. Grace's chest tightened. Her worst fear had arrived. Lily stepped closer, her innocent voice cutting through the tension. He said you're extraordinary. He looked at us like he knew us. Grace's vision blurred with tears. She sank into the chair, burying her face in her hands. The secret she had carried for 9 long years pressed so heavily on her that she could no longer hold it in. Emma's voice trembled. "Mom, who is he?" Grace lifted her head slowly, tears streaming down her cheeks. She reached for their hands, pulling them close. "That man, Alexander Cole, he's not just anyone." The triplets leaned in, waiting. "He's your father." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Ethan's jaw dropped, his eyes flashing with confusion. "Our father, the man who left you." Grace shook her head furiously. "No, he didn't know, he never knew about you." Her voice cracked. "I was scared, I thought I was protecting you, but maybe I was just protecting myself." Emma's lips trembled. "So all this time, he was out there and we didn't know." Lily clutched Grace's arm. "Does he love us?" Before Grace could answer, a firm knock rattled the door. The triplets froze. Grace's breath caught in her throat. Slowly, she rose and opened it. Alexander stood there, framed in the doorway. His gray eyes were wet, his strong shoulders tense as though he had been standing there for hours, summoning the courage. "Grace," he whispered, then his gaze shifted to the children. His voice broke. "My children." Emma, Ethan, and Lily stared at him, stunned. Grace's tears fell freely now. "I told them." Alexander stepped inside, his composure finally cracking. He dropped to his knees in front of the triplets, his hands shaking as though afraid to touch them. "I've missed 9 years of your lives," he choked out. "But if you'll let me, I'll spend the rest of my days making it up to you." For a long moment, silence filled the room. Then Lily took a hesitant step forward, resting her tiny hand against his. "Don't leave again," she whispered. Alexander's tears fell as he pulled her into his arms. "Never," he vowed, "not ever again." And as Emma and Ethan slowly joined the embrace, Grace stood watching, her heart breaking and healing all at once. For the first time in years, hope filled the room. A family, broken, bruised, but finally whole.